What's up everyone, this is Marcus with Twisted Ducati. Today I wanted to do a different video where I share my process of doing the full wash and detail on my new Ducati Multistrada. I thought there would be interest to share this process as I do detailing as well, and there are typically lots of questions surrounding the process of washing and detailing vehicles, including motorcycles. The washing sequence is important, so I'll take you through it step by step. You want to first start the process with a thorough rinse, removing as much dirt and debris as possible with simple water flow. Now, part of the process of detailing involves doing no harm to the vehicle, and the best way to do that is by employing a contactless wash system. This avoids introducing scratching to the painted surfaces by rubbing the dirt in through the surface contact. You also want to work within a cool shaded area rather than in direct sunlight. In terms of sequence, the best method is to start with the dirtiest portion of a vehicle first, and most of the time that means the wheels, which is why I'm attacking that first here. The reason you do this is because you want to avoid contaminating the clean surfaces with dirty residue. As you can see by the undercarriage, there's dirty soap splatter from the wheel cleaning, and if I had already washed those surfaces, they would then require an additional wash. After the wheels are cleaned, you want to attack the rest of the vehicle, working your way down from top to bottom, allowing the soap to run down and begin dissolving dirt below. In the vein of doing no harm, I first start with a contactless shampoo wash where I use a pH neutral snow foam to cover the entire vehicle. Depending on the thickness of your snow foam, it can dwell on the surface for up to 5 minutes. I use that dwell time to work on cleaning all the crevices and cracks of the vehicle with a soft bristle brush. There are a few flat surfaces on a motorcycle, so this is more efficient than a wash mitt that is a challenge to get into tight areas. Here I focus on all the crevices between the tank, the console, the lower portion of the fairings, the handlebar controls, the brake calipers, the spokes, the rims, the seat, the exhaust, the navigation screen, cooling fins on the engine, and so on. My process typically includes a chemical decontamination with an iron remover and a mechanical decontamination with a clay bar. However, with the age of this bike and having less than 1,000 miles, that was not necessary. Instead, I just focused on a very thorough wash before my next steps. Now, during this step, you want to work as quickly and efficiently as possible while still being thorough. You do want to avoid allowing the soap to dry on the surfaces, which could then create hard water spots. If you must work outside because there is no drainage in your garage, like in my case, you should attempt to do so in the earlier or later part of the day rather than midday when the sun is strongest. In this video you can see the color temperature changing throughout. The day was mostly overcast, which kept the temperature down and allowed me to work in the low 70s. If you find it difficult to work quickly enough and the soap begins to dry, you can rinse off sections after you've completed them and continue moving on to the rest of the vehicle. A good thorough rinse is just as important as a wash, and in my case, I'm using an electric pressure washer that runs at about 1100 psi. More importantly is the flow rate of a pressure washer, and you want to use something that flows at over 1 gallon per minute. You do not need a high-powered gas pressure washer that runs at over 3000 psi, as that could potentially do more harm than good. After a thorough rinse, you should inspect the entire vehicle and address any trouble areas that might require extra time and attention. In my case, there was chain lube runoff on the swing arm and the area near the gear selector underneath the front sprocket that required use of a higher powered all-purpose cleaner and extra rinsing. When possible, try to avoid hitting the chain with the pressure washer and washing off any required lubrication. If that is unavoidable, just be sure to re-lube the chain after the wash. Now, the next obvious step is to dry the vehicle, and there are two approaches to doing this. The first method is using the traditional drying towel, but in my case, I prefer to use air to remove excess water. The simplest method is to use something like a leaf blower that most people own, and in my case, I use a specialized tip with a rubberized ring at the end to avoid any potential damage should the tip come into contact with the painted surface. Additionally, I use a professional blow dryer with over 2 horsepower that blows heated and filtered air to remove excess standing water from all of the tight crevices. This is not only useful to avoid runoff that could interfere with your next steps like paint correction, but also to prevent any potential rust of components that do not use rust inhibitors. Another option is to use a common air compressor used with air tools. If you don't have any of these options and must use a towel, at least invest in a good quality plush microfiber towel that can effectively absorb the water with a single pass to avoid potentially scratching your paint. You see here, I typically spend a decent amount of time with the professional blower, ensuring that all standing water is removed, effectively drying the entire vehicle with barely any contact. Also, a forced air drying system allows you to effectively dry the areas that you couldn't typically get with a towel, like underneath the foot pegs and hard to reach areas around the engine and those tightly packed components within the frame. Anytime you make contact with the vehicle, even with clean and plush microfiber towels, you do have the potential to induce scratches in your paint. It is inevitable and an unfortunate and sad reality, but a close inspection of any new vehicle under proper lighting will reveal paint imperfections caused either at the factory or by the dealership in washing and prepping vehicles. My bike did have some light scratches, so my next step was to do some paint correction. The scratches were not that bad, so I wasn't aiming for absolute perfection here, but rather 85% or so of correction before applying the ceramic coating. You should begin this process with the test spot first in order to determine the combination of pad and compound that you'll want to use. You want to start out light and work your way up in aggressiveness, as there's no need to go in with a heavy compound and pad to correct light scratches. As I previously mentioned with my light scratches, my goal was to preserve as much of the factory clear coat as possible rather than target perfection. It's also important to choose the proper tool for the job, and in my case here I'm using a micro polisher rather than one of my larger polishers at 3 or 6 inches. With all the curves and angles on the motorcycle, it's more effective to use a precise tool like a micro polisher rather than a larger tool. After a couple of quick passes, you wipe the surface and inspect with the proper light to determine if you will require another pass and or step up the aggressiveness of the compound and pad. I started out with a softer pad and eventually stepped up to a slightly more aggressive pad with the same compound. Now the top case had suffered a lot of scuffs from me throwing my leg over the bike, and unfortunately I haven't yet acquired the proper coordination to do so without kicking the side cases. This side required more attention than the other. These scuffs were easily addressed with a couple of passes, but unfortunately they did nothing for the actual scratch at the front of the case that would require touch-up paint. Again, wipe clean and inspect before continuing with your next step, which in my case was the ceramic coating itself. Unfortunately, the camera's battery died and I was too lazy to retrieve another, so I didn't capture the coating application itself. But here are the end results after a thorough wash, detail, and coating. This angle was shot before reinstalling the side cases, but the next shot shows the entire bike. Being that the bike was new, you wouldn't expect a dramatic difference in paint vibrancy, but it is clearly more glossy, and that will only improve as the ceramic coating cures further. Now that the bike is clean and coated, the next step will be to apply paint protection film to the front nose section of the vehicle, but that will be in a separate video coming up. At the moment, the bike is at the shop having the rear tire replaced due to that large nail that punctured it. I appreciate your time and attention, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit that like button, and if you'd like to see more content, please consider subscribing and let me know what your thoughts were on this wash and detail job. Thanks again and take care.